Dearly beloved, welcome to this episode of the Making Magic podcast. Or if you're on YouTube or if you're reading in the newsletter, then you'll get it in those formats as well. And today I am pleased to have Mr. Tad Hargrave from marketingforhippies.com here. And we're going to have a conversation about POV, as in point of view, as in you honing what you actually believe, know, and embody as the truth of your work. And your point of view comes through your life experience, your educational experience, the things that you've noticed or observed in your clients, in your relationships, in your own self, in your own life. There's so many places that we can gather our unique point of view from. And then I guess the art of it is in the practice of sharing that point of view. So Tad has been harping on the point of view the point of view drum for a long time, because this is one of when it comes to marketing, Tad, how important is point of view?
It's really important. Yep.
What makes it important? Why is point of view such a important, crucial part of getting your message right?
Well, the very first thing we've got to do is just get people's attention. They have to notice that we exist. Once we've got that, we've got to establish relevance. They've got to look at what we're doing and say, okay, that's for me, that's not for me. That may or may not have to do with point of view, doesn't need to. But once we've established credibility, we've got to, or value, or sorry, relevance, credibility, value. Once we've established relevance, we got to go to credibility. And that's mostly point of view. Like, why should I trust you with your approach? You say you can get me from island A to B, great, but can you? Can you actually show me a plan that is believable, that I trust? You say your products are of the best quality, but can you show me the way that you actually make them and the materials and the whole approach you take to it? So this is the heart of trust in my mind. Point of view is a thing a lot of people sort of hide as proprietary sometimes. This is our secret sauce, but I think this actually needs to be shared because in sharing it, then people say, aha, yeah, you can do the thing that you say you can do. So now I'm going to get on board. Now I'm willing to spend money. And uh, so, and it also, of course, it's not just trust in that I believe you can do it, but it differentiates us. It separates us out. So hey, most people approach this problem this way, but we approach it in this way. Um, and also sometimes it just resonates with people that people will say, oh, there's a lot of people that do it, but this approach, this philosophy, this worldview resonates with me. But if we're not sharing it, if we're not articulating and putting it out, they may never know. You might have the most compelling point of view for your people, but if they don't know that, it's useless. This is the source of almost every piece of social media content you create, every newsletter you send out. If you write a book, if you make videos, if you do courses, this is the heart of that. This is the most compelling part of any sales letter that you ever write. It's not just the, hey, do you have this problem? You want this result? Here's what we got to sell. That's like 10%, 5% at the beginning, 5% at the end, but 90% of a really good sales letter or sales process or marketing process is making the case for the point of view, not making the case that they buy from you, but making the case for your approach to it. Because if they don't buy the course, they're not going to, or the concept, they're not going to buy the course. If they don't buy the premise, they don't buy the program. If they don't buy the diagnosis, they're not going to buy your prescription. So niche is important, of course, it's so fundamental, not trying to be everything to everybody. But now, great, you're in front of those people. You figured out your niche, you figured out who your people are, you know what you're offering, you're standing in front of them, and they're saying, great, what's your take on things? Why should we trust you? Lots of people come around here saying they can do what you do. So what's your take on things? What's your opinion? Why do you think I have this problem? Because this other person said it was this, and this other person said it was that. So what do you say instead? And if we can't say something that makes sense to them, that has a logic to it, it's either over or we'll wish it was over. Because if they become a client without an alignment on the point of view, now two things happen. One, they're disappointed, and you get drama. No good for anyone. So to me, this is so vital.
Beautiful. Now, For anybody out there that has that thing called perfectionism, that they feel like they have to wait until the point of view is perfectly perfect. Uh, I watch you over the years. You must have thousands of videos, or at least 1,000 videos on your YouTube, Instagram. You've got tons of ebooks. Like you've been prolific in honing your point of view. My guess is your point of view has been ever changing, not this static thing that is like this is just the way it is, and my point of view is perfect. So, what do you say to people that um, feel like they have to get their point of view perfect before they share it?
Well, first of all, I'd say the ideal situation is that you're not creating your point of view, you're inheriting it. I mean, this is, all traditional cultures. Every generation gets to inherit the wisdom of the last generations. But for most of us in the modern world, we're not there. And so there's a little bit of inheriting from sources, and there's a little bit of cobbling, there's an inheriting from multiple streams. So we're trying to put it all together into something.
Mm.
And there's a certain amount of we're having to invent it. I mean, a number of the ideas I have and that I share in marketing, I came up with. It wasn't necessarily borrowed from somebody else. So that the ideal situation is we would be receiving it. But given the absence of that, we're on, to some extent, the generating end of our point of view. We're on the figuring out uh, end of it. And if you're going to start to figure it out, it's it's going to be iterative. But it's interesting the etymology of the word articulate, because a lot of people say they struggle to articulate what they do, can't describe it. People say, "What do you do?" and never know what to say. So, but articulate the AR or the ART at the beginning. It's in a lot of words like art or arthritis. We also talk about how a dancer might articulate their body. And so when you dig into the word, you realize that what you have here, this prefix to it, is suggesting something about joints, something about connections, something about how things fit and hang together. It talks about a capacity for detail, uh, you know, uh, and so what you articulate articulates, and that goes both ways. When you take time to really come up with the most articulated, detail-rich model, you're going to be more eloquent. You're going to be more articulate as you speak because you're speaking from a map that you're seeing in your head or you can point to as you're talking. But it's also true that what you articulate articulates in that by speaking, you will find new things in the talking or by writing it out. When I wrote my point of view marketing ebook, a lot of the big ideas that are featured in that ebook were not there when I started writing it. There are things that come to me as I'm teaching, and I'm sure this is familiar to most people, but I'd be doing my intro workshops, touring those around, and as I was talking, something would hit some new connection. I get very excited. And so then my point of view has clarified, become more, there've been more joints to it. It's more supple, but it's also simpler. When we first start with a point of view, it's simplistic. It's like there's no detail in it. It's all real basic premises we probably heard from somebody else that we don't have a really deep understanding of. And then that stage one is simplistic. Stage two is it gets very complicated. First you're on the mountaintop, you see the vision, it's amazing. But then you go down into the valley and nothing looks like it looked like from up there. You're seeing it from a different vantage point. So now you got to spend years going around trying to learn the place on the ground and try to remember what you were seeing from up there. And then eventually you make it back up the mountain. And now you can see again, but you have a much more detailed understanding of what you're looking at. You really didn't know what you were looking at just from the heights. And that's when it's simple. So it's simplistic, complicated, simple. But the way we get to simple, you got to go through the complication. You start with simplistic, and that's just what you got. So we have to start with what we have. And simplistic has its place. So you start with that. But as you begin to talk about that and work with people from a view that might be simplistic, you're going to get feedback. Things aren't going to work. that all belongs to. That's great. So then you start to learn, you start to see the complications. And as long as you're not over-promising, you're fine. As long as you're not pretending you have it all figured out, you're just saying, look, this is what makes sense to me. I mean, that's probably the best summation of point of view marketing is this is what makes sense to me right now. This is my best take on it at the moment, knowing it will improve. And yeah, when I started, I mean, this was the trouble. I was doing this free intro evening workshop into a page can weekend workshop. And almost every time I did the intro, it changed. And I would do it and it would land and then it wouldn't land. And I couldn't even figure out what was missing. But I kept working on it, kept thinking it through, and then things started to click. And that's when people started paying me. That was when I realized I really landed it. People just were insisting on paying me from the free workshop. But yeah, you got to start somewhere. You just got to start with what you have. You start with what's clear, and then you do two things. You start to articulate it, you start to really reflect on it, you write it out, you draw it out. And as you do that, the ideas will become clearer. But the second is you do have to articulate it, you do have to share it with other people. And that could be conversations with friends, conversations with potential clients, with colleagues. But you share it, and in sharing it, in the conversation, things will appear. Sometimes you just see a facial reaction to something you say, and you're like, "What?" And that, that gives you a clue. So yeah, that's my sense on that.
It's beautiful. And the more you practice, I mean, my belief is like your best form of marketing is to teach, is to share, is to inspire. And the more you do each of those things, the clearer, as you said, it was like you would teach and things would just start firing. Ways that you've never thought about before would just come through in the moment. There's something magical that does happen when we're facilitating, when we're teaching with a live group versus talking to a dead camera, where there's a different energy that comes in and comes through that is hard to describe, but beautiful when it does spark.
Well, and yeah, exactly, exactly. You do have to talk it out a little bit. And what was I going to say? That yeah, the ideas will come sometimes in a gestalt. Sometimes there'll be a huge bam. Here's the idea. But sometimes it's just a little nugget that you'll get. And so you can share that. It's a little piece of clarity. It's not the whole thing, but you get this kind of, oh, I just saw something about this one part of the work that's so clear. So you make a video about that, you write an article about that, you do a webinar on that one specific little thing. And it doesn't seem like much, but there is the opportunity then down the road, which has happened for me a number of times. I want to create a webinar and I say, okay. So I just was doing what's it, the ideal client one. And I thought, well, what are all the things I've said about that in videos before? And I didn't have to rewatch all the video, but looked at the title, kind of remembered, oh yeah, I should weave that in, and oh, that can go in the workbook. So I was able to take all these different isolated pieces that I didn't record in any sequence or any order or imagining a connection to them, but I was able to then go back and harvest and bring it all together into something really coherent uh, at some point. Most of us, I mean, if you've been putting out any content on social media, you already have a bank. You've been writing stuff on Facebook, you've been doing little reels here, little posts there. And if you just go back over it and then kind of put it all on the table at the same time and say, okay, now how does this all fit together? This is the articulation. It's like you've got the little parts of Pinocchio,
Yeah.
and oh, that's an arm bone, I guess, and you don't even know it's just a pile of wood on the table at one point, but then you start to, oh, this goes here. I see this goes here, and then you get an articulated full, puppet, and then you got the strings, and you're fitting it all together, and you put the clothes on it. And then if you keep working on that, if you really devote yourself to it enough, it might just become a real boy. It might just get up and dance around a bit. It does take on a kind of beautiful life of its own in a way when it becomes so clear. And life, of its own in that it also spreads. Other people hear it and now they want to share it. Oh, I heard this idea from this person. It was so profound. And this is so much of the heart of word of mouth.
Yeah. Well, and I just wanted to name that like marketing for hippies, I would imagine was inspired by all of the shit that you saw happening in the marketing world, which was the opposite of your own internal values. And there you had to find a way to like, okay, if this is what feels terrible and wrong about the way people market and sell their products, my point of view is going to be the opposite of that. And then you started to explore, based on the contrast you saw, you found clarity and your point of view and your way forward. Is that accurate in describing that? How that
Yeah,
process?
I would tinker with that formulation a bit, but yes, starting with what do you see that horrifies you that you don't like? What's the bullshit in your industry that you can't stand? What's the stuff that drives you crazy? Where do you see the lack of ethics? There's a question of kind of what do you see missing? What's wrong out there? Where are the problems at that your point of view can start to form? Because the fact that you even notice those things says something. Because most people don't working. The only thing I'd say is I'd be wary of going the route of I'm not because
Oh, we froze. Froze for a little bit there.
where
We're
did you
back.
lose?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what was the last thing you heard me say?
Froze for about 60 seconds. Almost. Maybe close to 60.
Where did we drop off? Do you recall?
You were talking about just the act of like just your ability to observe those things and how that affects you is like a unique trait.
Yeah. Yeah, and that the only thing I'd say is to be wary of going to for the opposite point of view. Because if you go for the opposite, this can be oppositional and it can deeply entrench the thing that you imagine you're fighting against. You think you're creating an alternative or an antidote, but you're just making a twin, the other side of the same coin. So it's there's a bit of a deeper meditation of, okay, there's all this stuff that is driving me crazy. So what might be a worthy response to this?
Hmm.
What is, how did this come to be that it's this way? What is really going on? There needs to be the deeper a diagnosis we can bring to it, the more trustworthy the prescription will be. Um, because otherwise, what happens is people say, I remember I had some colleagues that came to Winnipeg. I'd just done a workshop there and they did a training where they did the hard, pushy sales stuff to people I'd endorse them to. And at the end, I kind of asked, like, did you learn anything from this? And they're like, yeah, we shouldn't have talked about our pricing. That was their diagnosis, that the problem was the pricing, but the problem was that they suddenly said, hey, we've got a special deal, but it's only good for the next 5 hours. And, they did the whole dropping the price in a very contrived way. That was the problem. And so if we don't go deep enough in our diagnosis, you might come up with something that sounds catchy, but it's not going to last. It's not going to build trust over time. So um, it's not so much coming up with an opposite view, but coming up with a wider view, trying to see more. If there's something that's crazy in the marketplace, you don't, I mean, it's not going head to head with it, but it's stepping back. It's doing this and kind of trying to get a different look at it to see more. And if you do, this is what makes you trustworthy because you don't have to be picking a fight with anyone, which is one of the fears people have is, oh, I got to say the scary thing then. I've got this
Talk about that.
terrifying thing.
We're going to talk about that. Let's talk about the scary thing now.
Yeah, people are like, well, there's something I'm going to say, but if I say it, it'll upset my colleagues. I'll be, cast out of the industry. People will come at me and cancel me and attack me. Now, there is truth to that. There are some things you say that if you say them, you're out with certain people and there will be feedback. But a couple of things I've noticed to be true. One, it's short-lived usually. There's an initial blast and it kind of evens out because people just lose interest in you at a certain point. Number two, it's almost never as bad as we think. Um, and number three, that's also how you find your allies. When you finally say the thing, it's the emperor's new clothes. So the king's naked, the one who's willing to say it is the one who gets the recognition. But we're often scared to say it. And I think partly because we've conflated this oppositional thing with the scary thing, and that somehow I have to get out there and say everybody else is wrong and I'm right, they're stupid and I'm smart. And so we don't want to feel arrogant. And as a society, we're not so good at stating a view in a way that doesn't demonize, that doesn't dismiss other people. But there is a way to say it, which kind of goes back to the beginning of this. Well, here's how it seems to me now. This is how I've come to see it. This is what I've come to understand. We can use language like this that takes the oppositional nature out of it. It's like, look, there's other understandings. This is just where I'm at. This is what I'm seeing these days. And here's why. And I understand other people see it this way. Here's why I don't. But sort of on points of merit,
Yeah.
we can break down our disagreement without using epithets or name calling to dismiss the other person, uh, implying that anyone who would believe this is stupid. It's not that that doesn't work. I mean, tragically, sadly, it does. But then you get these entrenched camps. And that's not my understanding of what's needed in the world right now is more entrenchment of, polarized opinions. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Wouldn't it be nice if everybody with whoever they follow politically would go through a process of like weeding out the point of views from both sides and taking time to reflect because there might be merit on both sides, but because people are so entrenched in their political views, they even if the other side was blatantly right, they wouldn't admit it. So the same thing goes with every aspect. It's like, wouldn't that just be lovely? Wouldn't it be lovely?
Well, and it's, instead of appealing to identities, you're appealing to ideas.
Yeah.
You're appealing to here's a thought, and you're making the case for those ideas. And I know the identity thing comes into it, but it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to lean on that so hard, and we certainly don't have to consider our point of view as um, an attack. We don't have to approach it that way, though we could as an attack on anybody else. We can just say, look, I disagree. Here's why. I think they're wrong about this, but it doesn't have to be, and therefore these are, terrible people. I mean, there are terrible people in the world. There's that too. But yeah, you can hear everything I'm saying right now is also my point of view about point of view. This is the understanding I've come to about point of view, and other people may see it differently as well and say, Tad, you're being way too middle of the road on this. And what we do need to do is take a stance. That's probably got a seat at the table too. Well,
I would like to hear that person's point of view about that point of view.
right.
Wouldn't that be nice? If we all just got around, shared our point of views, and then we could kind of mix and mingle our point of views, shift our ideas and our perspectives by seeing other people's side of things. I mean, that's how beautiful ideas are made. I think it's where we need to go, whether it's for your business and in your industry, is like understanding the different types of point of view and where do you stand in relationship to them and what is your own unique take on the situation. Or if it is something that's more political, like helping to really understanding the different sides of the story and finding where you land in there, not because somebody told you to think a certain way.
Yeah, well, and it's, if you want your business or your political movement to grow fast, then go simplistic.
Hmm.
But if you want it to last, it's got to be simple. If you want it to just do nothing in particular, stay in complexity and nobody understands what you're doing. But the short-term fix is absolutely be simplistic, and we see that on the news all the time, that it's black and white, it's this or that. And the simple thing will never be quite, it doesn't have the octane, it doesn't have the flammable, combustible power of the simplistic world, but it does last.
Yeah.
So then this becomes a question, how long do you want to be in business? Do you want to be in business for the next week, for the next year, for the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Because if this is the rest of your life, then this is what makes you reliable, is having a nuanced, well-articulated point of view. Plus, there's marketing on top of that. You can have a really nuanced, wise point of view, and nobody knows about you. So that's not the whole story. But this is what, and the capacity to reduce it then to something simple. That is, people can digest that on its own and say, and there's more.
Mm.
But at the simplistic side, there is no more. There's just louder. There's no more depth, but there is an increase in volume. Whereas with the simple, you don't need more volume. You don't need more loud. It's like a clearer signal, clearer and clearer that can cut through the noise. And then if you have some hustle, if you have some good hubs, if you do some, good business model, you think through the rest of that stuff, you can do very, very well. Um, but if you do this simplistic thing, it's a bit of a flash in the pan. And also, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. You go at other people like this, and it's probably going to come back at you, and you may not like the long-term consequences of that, though it'll be a wild ride until you get there. Um, so there's that too.
It's that too. And so if people are inspired by that, they're like, well, shit, I don't know what I actually think is my point of view, or maybe I'd like to rethink my point of view or practice my point of view. Do you have anything coming up that people could come practice their point of view?
I do, of course. Yeah, April 15th, we're starting our point of view semester in my membership. So it's a 3 months where we dig very deep into this. We start with the simple, or this kind of simplistic, like what's your message? What's your core idea that your business is based on? Which is surprisingly easy to land on, or at least one or two of them. And then we look at what I call the three cases. So when you're making your case, there's this diagnosis, the prognosis, and the prescription, and all of those have to be thought through and articulated. We look at what I call the point of view pyramid, which for nautical references is that, if you're getting people from island A to B, you're going to need to have a map, you're going to need to have a compass, you're going to need to be able to plot out a route from one island to the other, and that translates fairly directly into the marketing world. And then we look at we go deep, deep, deep into 5 levels of it. That all this stuff we tend to look at just at the individual level, but there's also the institutional, intergenerational, there's multiple levels. And then we look at how do you make the case? What's the evidence you need? And all of it's in service towards at the end, we're going to be creating a My Philosophy page for your website. So that's kind of the final project of it is how do you take all of this and turn it into a My Philosophy page and or, if you're a little bit more ambitious, into a signature workshop where you take this core philosophy and approach and you make the case for it, weave in the right stories so that when you get in front of people and they say, okay, go. What's your pitch? You actually have something worth saying that's not just buy from me, sign up with me. When you get this stuff in place, you no longer need to make the case for them to buy from you. Primarily, you're making the case for your approach. And this takes so much of the pressure out of the whole situation. So that's what's coming up 3 months, mid-April to mid-July.
Beautiful. That sounds perfect. And the link for that will be in the notes that I send out wherever you're watching this YouTube podcast, newsletter, etc. You can check out the link there to get yourself registered. There's lots of time. It sounds like a beautiful creative practice, regardless, for people that just want that practice, that repetition, the community support to like bounce your ideas off people and see how they land, and to have the expert facilitation skills from you to guide them along the journey. That sounds great.
Thanks, man. Thanks for making the time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. I always love these conversations. Learn lots. Thank you, Tad. Thank you, everybody. Stay awesome and hear or see us next time.